So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to a Brilliant Businesses podcast. My name is Nick Bryant, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by Emma Baker from Dynasty Wills and Estate Planning. Good morning, Emma.
Hi, Nick. Thank you for having me.
That's all right. It's a good pleasure to see you. On this cold morning, we've both come in with very cold hands, haven't we? In the frosty.
I know our handshake outside was just not great.
Yeah, very cold. So Dynasty Wills are a estate planning business offering the drafting of wills and lasting power of attorney documents, as well as supporting with finance and probate. Have I got that right?
Yes, that's right.
And we're going to start off with yourself, Emma, talking about how you got into becoming a will writer. Tell us about your story.
Yeah, of course. So I'm actually trained as a barrister. So I did my bar course in London, and that's a sort of practical training for a barrister where you learn all the practical skills. So I did that at University of Law in London.
Okay.
So then I completed that in 2020, and I was called to the bar in 2021. That might sound like a bit of a strange phrase, but that's essentially the sort of overarching board for barristers that you get called to the bar. There is actually a bit of a story behind that I like to tell as well. It's called the bar because in the olden days, the barristers actually used to stand at a wooden bar, and the clients used to come up with them and put the money in their robes. So that's why it's still being called to the bar.
Oh, okay.
So the tradition has been pulled forward as much like the profession. There's a lot of old tradition in being a barrister.
Okay.
But anyway, went on a side there talking about being called to the bar, but was called to the bar in 2021. And as I was explaining before, Nick, there's a sort of last part for training as a barrister, the last part where you train under a more senior barrister for a year or 18 months.
Yeah.
And places for that is very competitive, so the places are very few and far between. So especially during COVID, I know that a lot of people had to diversify with what they were thinking about doing professionally, and that's how I ended up will writing. So I ended up at a firm down in Hastings, so quite local, which was great for me. But it was a completely new area of law. I hadn't done any sort of will writing or succession laws in my degree, so it was a completely new area of law. But I've always loved drafting, so I knew that I was going to like the sort of writing side of it, but the actual learning the new laws was completely new for me. But I had a fantastic team that I worked with, and if any of them are listening, I just wanted to say thank you for training me so well, because I probably wouldn't be here without you.
Excellent. That's lovely. And I suspect with it as well, you meet a lot of people, and you get to know a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, as you can imagine, it's very interesting hearing some people's, personal lives, but that's part of the way that I like to think I'm a bit more, empathetic and contemporary as well, because I think there's a stereotype with will writing that you're going to go to a solicitor and it's perhaps going to be a kind of stuffy old man. He's going to sit there, with the leather sort of clipboard, as it were, pile of books, and you're going to feel a bit uncomfortable, out of place, and not happy talking about your sort of personal wishes. And I want to be the opposite. I want to either come to see you at your home, or you come to see me, or obviously if it's remote, it's over Zoom with the power of technology these days. But I want you to feel comfortable talking about whatever you want to talk about. If there's an issue you'd like to, talk to me about in a sort of therapeutic way, we can do that. And then it leads me on to helping you think about your wishes, what you're wanting in your will, or your LPA, of course, but more likely with a will that there might be sort of family issues that need to be looked into. But that's what I want to be. I want to be more open, I suppose. I want you to have the opportunity to get to know me if you want to, and be more empathetic and have a really non-judgmental ear talking about the personal issues, as you say.
I think if they get to know you and you get to know them on a personal level, then it's going to flow out of them a lot easier, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And I really don't mind if people, want to ask about, my family situation, or if I have a will, or just other things. Like when I post on Facebook, I, post some personal things about, I have horses and about riding, and it's just a way to open up the conversation that as much as I'm a professional, I do have a personal life and personal wishes. And as I say, I'm totally non-judgmental and empathetic to the fact that everyone has varying situations.
Yeah. How do you find running a business?
Daunting sometimes,
Isn't it? Yeah.
Especially at my age. I think some people look at me and think, oh, you're a bit young to be doing it, but I disagree with that. I think there's no wrong or right time to be doing it. Sometimes you just have to look at what's in front of you, the cards that you've got in front of you, and think, well, I am capable of doing this. And one of my very close friends who I used to work with, was still very close now, he said to me, you've got everything in place, you just need to take the leap. He said, you're waiting for this sign, but it might never come. And I'm so glad he said that, and we talk about it now, because I don't think, if he hadn't said that, I don't know if I'd be here. Because really? I was just waiting and waiting, thinking, oh, what if it doesn't work out, and what if it's not right? But actually it has worked out, and it's nearly 18 months later, and I'm really enjoying it. But as you say, it can be very daunting when running a business. As I've got all the legal skills and everything I need to draft a will, etc. But running a business is a whole different kettle of fish. So sounds cliche, but I'm learning all the time, and I've got a really good support network around me. So
excellent, good for you. And you mentioned 2021, so it's sort of going through COVID when you set up, and there've been a few probably changes in rules going through that where people can sign things remotely, which must have made life easier.
Yes, you are still, as far as I'm aware, you still are able to sign wills remotely. Obviously, moving out of COVID now, I recommend that you do see people in person.
Yes.
Just because then you don't have to worry about all the sort of, as you say, rules and regulations of signing remotely. It's easier if you are able to get together and sort of sign the will in the presence of each other. But as you say, COVID changed a lot in terms of the way that a lot of businesses were running. As I say, a lot of things have gone more remote now, and now people are more comfortable using, say, Zoom, for example, to do meetings online, which is then very helpful for me, because as much as I do enjoy and prefer to go out and see my clients in person, obviously if I have clients that are coming from further away, the only practical approach is for us to do it remotely, which then a lot of people are comfortable with now, which is helpful.
Yes, it is, isn't it? Let's get down to the nuts and bolts about what a will is and why is it important to have a will. Let's go through that.
So the basis of it, essentially, your will gives you control over your assets. If you don't have a will, your estate will follow what's called the rules of intestacy. So this is a pathway set by the government which specifies where your assets go, and you don't have any control over this. You can't change it. The only way you can change where your assets go is to make a will.
Okay. So that's that says all about why it's important. And we were talking earlier about some examples of people that haven't had wills, and what can happen if that does happen. We spoke about Amy Winehouse, didn't we?
Yes, she's one of my favourite singers, and I know a lot of people know she died very young, and she died without a will, so what's called dying intestate. So her estate, and as you can imagine, quite a large estate by that point because of her success, followed the rules of intestacy. And then the first sort of rung of the rules of intestacy are that it goes back to your parents, and as a lot of people were aware, she didn't have a very great relationship with her father, and all her money, assets, property went back to her parents and back to her father, who you can't speak for the dead, as it were, but I'm sure a lot of people would think that she wouldn't have wanted that to happen.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. She probably wouldn't be very happy about that right now, would she? Well, there's another sign of importance. And explain to us what an executor of a will is.
So your executor is someone who what we call administers your estate. So that might sound like a strange phrase, but that's essentially just the person that takes care of everything for you when you've passed away.
Okay.
So what they'll do in essence is they'll round up your estate, meaning they'll take a look at all your assets and everything that you have so they know where they are. And then they'll pay off any debts you might have, any legal fees and any expenses, say your funeral expenses, for example, and then they'll see that your estate goes in accordance with your will. So they'll take it through the process called probate, which is where all your assets are valued, any taxes are paid, and then essentially at the end is obviously all paid to the beneficiaries. So that's overarching what they do, but the way I'd like to explain it, I can go through that whole rigmarole explaining it, but essentially it's just the person that's going to take care of everything for you when you pass away and sort everything out, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And the probate side of things, so is that done by someone else?
So it's done by the executors. They're the person that takes the estate through probate, and that's the kind of government process that any estate over £5,000 has to go through.
Okay.
As I say, the estate's valued, and then any inheritance tax is paid. So the executor is the person that takes it through that whole process.
Okay. And how often should you update your will?
I would say as a sort of benchmark every 5 years at least, or if you have a change in circumstances. So say, for example, if you get married, if you have children, if you have a large change in assets. So obviously if your assets massively increase, you might want to rethink about what your wishes are.
Okay.
Or another one is a death of a beneficiary. If somebody's passed away before you that you were looking to leave your assets to, you might want to have a rethink if that's the case. So those are just some examples. There could be various reasons that could mean a change of circumstances, but every 5 years, or if you have a material change in circumstances.
A big change, yeah. Now, we've mentioned that LPA, lasting power of attorney. Let's talk about that and what that actually means as well. Yeah,
of course. So there's some confusion between wills and lasting powers of attorney. I think some people think they're the same thing or they work together. They're actually completely separate documents. So lasting powers of attorney are documents used while you're still alive during your lifetime to give somebody else the ability to help you making decisions if you're no longer able to yourself.
Okay.
So there are two types. There's one for property and finance decisions and one for health and welfare decisions. You can have one or both. That's, completely up to you depending on what your circumstances are. Couple of distinctions with them as well. The property and finance document can come into force immediately once it's been registered. So what that means is even when you still have mental capacity, you can have your attorneys give them permission to act for you. So it can be quite useful if, say, for example, you've still got mental capacity, but you're quite frail, say, for example, and you couldn't, say, go out to the bank or you need help with sort of day-to-day things. Or another example, if you have a short stay in hospital and you need somebody to kind of help out with finances. So that's a kind of way that the property and finance document is quite useful. Where on the other hand, the health and welfare document only comes into force when you no longer have mental capacity. So any health decisions will only be made by your attorneys if you're no longer able to make them yourself.
Right. There's a lot of ins and outs, isn't there? There's a lot of detail. And it's all bespoke, isn't it? Everyone's different.
Yes, exactly. And I think choosing an attorney, much like choosing an executor, is, choosing someone that you trust to actually act in your best interest. So anyone can be an attorney as long as they're obviously an adult over 18. But as I say, it doesn't have to be a family member. It could be a friend or someone you work with, but somebody that you know is going to act in your best interest. And as you say, that could vary person to person.
Yeah. I guess in some cases you might not want it to be a family member, someone impartial.
Yes, exactly. Someone, as you say, more impartial, more independent. You can appoint professional attorneys, but obviously the issue with that is that they're going to obviously charge fees for their services, but that's obviously a decision that the individual can make if they're wanting to have professional attorneys. The only other sort of caveat is that for your property and finance document, your attorney can't be bankrupt. Might seem like an obvious situation, but obviously if they're not very good with money themselves, then maybe they shouldn't be handling yours. But
that's that. Do companies need wills and LPAs?
Yes, so actually talking about LPAs, you can actually have specific business LPAs, so to separate your sort of personal wishes away from your business affairs. So if you were incapable of carrying on your business, for example, then you'd appoint an attorney to just have power over your business affairs. So you can sort of write details of how you'd like the company to be carried on. So there are sort of the same but different, if that makes sense. They're just specifically about your business affairs, which someone in business, especially if you're kind of self-employed or it's quite a small business, it might actually be something to consider. Because if you're no longer able to, then does your business just stop? It's the things you don't think about sometimes.
Yeah, that sounds really important, actually, that people should put that in place. And you can deal with that as well for people, for businesses.
Yes, exactly. As I say, it is same but different, still doing lasting powers of attorney, but you make it very specific about the business affairs.
Okay. Emma, what do you like about this the most? You obviously get a lot of pleasure out of it. What's the best bit about your job?
It sounds like a cliche, but I really do love helping people.
Okay. Yeah.
It's strange, actually, because in my personal life, I'm quite introverted. I wouldn't say I'm a massive people person, but in business, I actually really enjoy helping people. And the best part of closing a case for me, as it were, that I can look back and think I've actually made some difference to them. It might be, 20 years in the future, but if something does happen to them, I know they're safe and secure, and I've gone away and they feel more safe and secure for the future. So I'd say that's my favourite part, is actually helping people, but it does sound like a massive cliche.
No, that's great. That's if you get the most benefit from that, then it keeps you inside happy, doesn't it? And you're an equestrian of some sort, you were saying. You like horses and horse riding.
Yeah, so I have a horse called Tom. So I do eventing, so that's doing dressage, show jumping and cross country, either all in one day or across 3 days. So I've been sort of riding competitively for about 10 years now. Obviously, COVID as well, had to have a bit of a break, but I didn't necessarily think that was a bad thing because I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a massive competitive person, but I can put quite a lot of pressure on myself sometimes. So in sport and in business, sometimes you just have to think about how far you've come, I think, thinking about moving forward, but actually take a moment to look back sometimes and think, actually, you built this from the ground up, or look how far you've come with your sport, and don't be so hard on yourself sometimes, which I am, I think people would say.
Yeah, okay, but I agree with that. You've got to sit back sometimes and think, how well you've done, where you are now. Think about the future, but think about where you are now. That's the important thing, I think. But talking of the future, how big do you want to grow your business? Because some wills and trust businesses are quite big, aren't they?
Yeah, they are quite big. I think the honest answer to that is dependent on where I go with my career.
Okay.
So I'm still looking at doing a pupillage, so the last part of training to be a barrister.
Right,
so
okay.
if I get that, then I would go on to then be a practicing barrister.
Okay.
It's not necessarily to say that I would stop doing estate planning altogether, but that's the kind of idea that I'd like to do. In terms of where this business goes, I wouldn't like to see it wound up, to be honest. Obviously, it's still small at the moment, but I would hesitate to say sell it, but I would like to see if there's someone I know that would want to carry it on, and I do have someone in mind. So
excellent. Well, that's really forward thinking. That's really good. You've got a little quiz that we can do, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Would you like to do? It's just a true or false, Nick.
I'll give it a go. Give it a go.
And we haven't
We've not
prepared
read
this. We've not read it,
No.
so Nick's going off the cuff. So just true or false.
Okay.
Read a statement to you. Just say if you think true or false.
All right.
So if I'm married, I have to appoint my spouse as the executor.
I'd say that is false.
That is false.
Yes.
You can appoint anyone you like to be an executor. You need obviously to have at least one, and you can have up to 4 acting jointly.
Okay. Excellent.
Perfect. So the next one is my old will is no longer valid when I get married.
That's true.
It is true.
Yeah.
So getting married will invalidate your previous will. So there is a way around this if you're writing a will at the moment and looking at getting married in the future. So you can write what's called a contemplation of marriage clause at the top of your will to say, if I get married, this will isn't to be revoked. But if you don't do that, then your will be revoked when you get married. So obviously the provisions you've got in your previous will no longer stand, and you'll need to do a new will essentially.
And also, if you've not been married before and you get married, that's when you need to do a will as well, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So marriage is probably one of the key changes that I'd say you really need to look at your planning again, because a lot obviously changes for you, but also in terms of the legality of it, your will may not be invalid, or if you don't have one, it could be a reason to look at doing one.
Yes. Okay,
so number 3, if I'm not married but I've been cohabiting with my partner for 5 years, they will inherit all my assets if I don't have a will.
I'm going to say that's false.
That is false.
Okay.
So cohabitees don't have.
Relief.
Yeah, the cohabitees don't have the same rules under the rules of intestacy. So it's only spouses and civil partners. There is a bit of room for reform in this area. They are looking at adding cohabitees that have been, as you say, together for X number of years. But at the moment, it's only if you're married or in a civil partnership. So another reason to think about getting a will if you're not intending getting married, because it won't automatically pass to your partner if you're not married. So.
Yeah. And just that when you've got patchwork families, if you want to call them, with kids on different sides as well, that can cause all sorts of confusions, I would have thought.
Yes, exactly. So as you say, if you've got more complex circumstances, that's definitely a reason to think about your planning and your wills, especially because, as you say, if you've got the kind of patchwork families or differing wishes, you wouldn't want to be dying intestate, because the rules are then set for you, as you say, if you've got other wishes that you want to have. As I said at the start, that's the main reason to get a will, so you have control over where your assets go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay,
number 4, I can only give a gift of money to charity in my will.
I'd say that's false as well.
It is false. So you can give a gift of money to anyone in your will. Of course, you can give a gift of money to charity. You can also give specific items away. So if there's, say, a piece of jewellery or any sort of specific item you want to give away. And you can, of course, also do a gift of property. So if you specifically want to pull your property out of your estate and give that separately, you can do that as well. So
and pets as well, horses, for instance.
Yes, and pets. You can do, as you say, what's called a pet's legacy. So to give your animals, your pets, to a specific person.
Yeah, I think I read about what's her name, Carole King, the singer. I think she left her cats to certain people. I read that once.
Yeah, there's a question that people do ask me, about the executors, but especially about pets. Do I need to ask the person that I'm putting in? I said, well, not for me to write it down. You don't need to ask them, but practically it's probably best to ask them. Let them know that they're, maybe going to be given the responsibility.
Yeah. Excellent. Have we got any more?
Yeah, just one more.
Okay.
I can appoint guardians in my will for any minor children, but they have to be a family member.
I'd say that's false.
Yeah, that's false as well.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you're on a roll. So again, you can appoint anyone you like as a guardian.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have to be over 18 to have parental responsibility. The only thing to note about guardians is just think about the practicality. So, for example, if someone lives abroad, that might not be practical because obviously either the children would have to move or they'd have to move back here. So when considering guardians, firstly, much like the executors or attorneys, think about someone you are happy to have your children would act in their best interest, but then also the practicalities of location, ability to take on children, and things like that. Lots to think about, but that's kind of why I'm here. So to take you through all those sections and talk about what your needs and wishes might be, which is maybe the danger of doing a DIY will or sort of DIY LPAs, less so with the LPAs because there's quite a lot of support online, but the wills, especially doing a DIY will, as much as you might get the basis of what your wish is down, there are things you might have missed out. Or certain, legal phrases that need to be in there just to make sure everything's sort of airtight, if that makes sense. That's one of the reasons why, yes, you can do a DIY will, but like anything, if you need help with something, you go to a professional, don't you?
Absolutely.
So that's why I'm here to help talk through all your wishes and get everything all laid out for you so you're feeling more safe and secure.
I think also you would suggest things that they hadn't thought of as well, especially when you're talking about the guardians and they're going, well, I don't really know. But then you can say, well, have you got anyone who's this or got this character? Because they may not have thought that. And that's where you come in as well, I thought.
Yes, I think the phrase, I hadn't thought of that is actually one I hear an awful lot, especially when you, as you say, get down to the nitty gritty talking about gifts and the pets and things like that. People just didn't realise they could even do it or, hadn't thought about it. And that's, again, one of the reasons why you might come and talk to me because, I'll have thought about it so we can chat through it all. Some of it might be relevant for you, some of it might not, but wouldn't you rather me ask all the questions and you can say, oh, no, thank you, rather than miss something out potentially?
Exactly. And can people come to you for just a consultation to see whether they want to, if it'll work for them?
Yes, of course. So as you say, you can, contact me in any way you wanted to and just sort of come for an initial chat, as you say, a consultation. And then the idea is that if you wanted to go ahead either doing your wills or LPAs, whatever we're talking about, is to get you booked in for an appointment with me. And as I say, that's the time where we talk through all your wishes and go through sort of all the sections, either of the will or the LPA, and talk everything through with you. Excellent. And then it's sort of only at the end that when all the sort of documents are signed, as it were, and it's ready to go, that I'd then obviously ask for payment. And those are all fixed fees. So I know a lot of people worry about going to a solicitor that there are going to be lots of hidden charges, but you don't have that with us because it's all fixed fees. It's all black and white in front of you even before you begin, so you know where you are, and that's the whole process.
Excellent.
VAT included, fixed fees, so you know where you are.
Well, let's just run through the prices because we was going to do that earlier, but so tell us how much it is.
So for a single will, that's, as the name suggests, is for a single person. So for a single will is 125, so 125.
That's so reasonable as well.
And then, well, we like to think so. Again, trying to make it a bit more accessible for people. You know, solicitors can be. I've heard some crazy quotes from solicitors for doing LPAs, especially. But anyway, digressing. For mirror wills, so that's two wills mirroring, as that suggests, mostly for couples and partners, but not necessarily. But if you think of it like that, for couples, mirror wills is 200, so the two together, and then for the LPAs they start at 250, but ranging depending on sort of what sort of products you're wanting to take out. As I say, and as you said, Nick, is lovely for you to say that, but we like to keep the prices reasonable, as I say, fixed fees to be more accessible for people. I'm trying to spread the word about wills, especially that between 50 and 60% of adults in the UK don't have a valid will. Is that
right? Wow.
So obviously it fluctuates, but between 50 and 60%, which is a huge percentage. And you think about, we're talking about celebrities, but the average person is going to lose, control of the assets that they've potentially worked their whole life for if they don't have a will. All those people that don't have a will, they might be thinking, I must do that. But if it's too expensive, then you're just not going to do it, are you?
And I think that's why some of them think, I won't do that. That's too expensive. I know they're expensive. I'm not going to do that. But knowing that's really accessible. Yeah.
So as I say, accessibility. And then it's probably another reason you're asking me about what contemporary means earlier. Yeah. It's the fixed fees. It's being more open about the conversation as well, I think. And as I say, touched about on the appointments, they can be at a time and place that suits you. If I'm doing my appointments in person, I do like to say, can we have a face-to-face? It's just easier to build rapport that way.
Yeah.
And as you say, easier to talk about your issues. And, and obviously I have normal working hours, but I am more than happy to do appointments either at weekends or evenings,
That's good to know.
as you say, to be more accessible for people. So just trying to help people as much as possible. Again, I know that sounds like a massive cliche, but these are important documents, and I think it's something that's always on people's to-do list.
Yeah.
But it takes them a while to actually do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's bottom of the list for some reason.
Yes,
Crazy, isn't it?
but obviously it's easy for me to say, it should be top of your list, but they are important documents, so it is something you should consider, especially in the new year now. Resolutions and getting your ducks in a row. It's maybe time to think about the future as well and what your wishes are. Yeah,
absolutely. Now's a great time, isn't it? We start the new year, a new plan, getting in touch. So thank you, Emma. That's brilliant. You've told us everything, and it's been really, really interesting to hear your stories. And,
thank you for having me, Nick.
And what you can do. So if anyone out there wants any information about wills and estate planning and LPAs, then please get in touch with Emma. All her details are on the Brilliant Businesses website, and they'll be underneath this podcast. Thank you again, Emma, and we'll look forward to another podcast soon. Perhaps we'll see you again sometime.
Thank you.
Okay, see you.